All right, the National Security Council will meet tomorrow to discuss whether or not to extend the movement control order, which is scheduled to end this Thursday. What will be their deliberation? For starters, Senior Minister for Security Cluster, Datuk Sri Ismail Sabri Yaakob today assured that the government will not impose a strict lockdown similar to the MCO last year and reiterated the need to protect lives while preserving the livelihoods of Malaysians.
Kita tak mahu rakyat kita mati kerana COVID, tetapi kita juga tidak mahu rakyat kita mati kerana tak makan, kerana tidak ada pendapatan untuk menjaga keluarga mereka dah. Jadi saya rasa kita kena strike the balance tu, perimbangan tu antara menjaga kepentingan ekonomi dan juga kepentingan rakyat untuk hidup.
Just how should we balance lives and livelihoods to determine which policy is best to bring down the number of COVID-19 cases in the country? The situation has continued to worsen, with cases above 4 figures consistently over the past few weeks, with today's new cases at 4,214. We spoke to Datuk Dr. Syed Muhammad Al-Junid, founding professor and chair of health policy and management at Kuwait University, on whether we need to rethink our strategies.
I believe that we cannot actually do the same thing like we did before on the MCOs. We have to change the strategy now. If you want to do movement control order, it should be targeted on certain areas and certain cluster. It is not a generic MCOs that we have done before. It will not work anymore. So I think if you want to extend, the extension is a different strategy. You want to actually focus on the clusters, and then you control only within the cluster that are affected. It's not a generic kind of MCOs because the effect on the economy is so bad.
Now, just yesterday, the Health Ministry confirmed that the surge in new COVID-19 cases being reported in the country was due to a delay in reporting to the Ministry's Crisis Preparedness and Response Centre, the CPRC, and the Public Health Laboratory Information System, or SIMCA. At the onset, each new cases reported meant we are 2 weeks behind. How then can we craft our public health policies taking into account this stumbling block which paints an inaccurate picture of the real COVID-19 situation in the country?
The incidence numbers is more important than the actual number that we are being reporting. And we cannot depend only the number of cases as one figure to reflect our capacity to manage this. We want to know other information. For example, what about our capacity of health system in managing this? Bed occupancy rate of the ICUs, for example, is another indicator which is quite important. But we also want to know the number of tests.
Further COVID-19 development, the Malaysian Medical Association MMA claimed that it would be unfair to target private clinics and hospitals for delay in reporting COVID-19 cases. On Sunday, the Selangor State Government announced that compound notices can be issued to private clinics or hospitals that do not report positive cases directly on the same day through SIMCA. MMA President Professor Datuk Dr. Subramaniam Munyandi said that the government healthcare facilities that work with private clinics are stretched to their limits. He explained that Health Ministry SOP dictates that it is the duty of the person conducting laboratory processing of samples to report the results via SIMCA. He questions then the blame on private practitioners because all RT-PCR tests are processed in laboratories, unlike RTK antigen tests, which may be processed at the private facilities themselves. Therefore, he says, how can anyone claim that the delay in reporting confirmed cases via SIMCA is due to the failure of reporting by private practitioners? MMA implores all parties to stop the blame game and for private practitioners to be given an apology. MCO is not the only tool to combat the pandemic. There are other approaches that can be considered to ensure number of cases remain manageable.
We need to actually mobilize the community. So the community must be empowered and they have to be trained, they have to be educated on how to manage the COVID-19 themselves. The second thing is that we must actually provide more support to the frontliners. The frontliners must be given adequate budget and they must be given adequate support in order for them to carry out their responsibility. We have to change the strategy. I mentioned here the strategy of doing generic MCO to a more targeted MCOs. The intersectoral collaboration need to be improved and need to be enhanced in order for us to mobilize enough resources from various sectors. There must be a need for us to have actually a bit improve in the data sharing. This is very important. Give a priority on how we can immunize the population.
Meanwhile, the police said it will no longer compromise with those who flout SOPs related to COVID-19. Ismail Sabri said while the government has been focusing on construction sites and factories to contain the virus, it doesn't mean that the public can disobey the law. Beginning Thursday, he said strict action will be taken without compromise on those who flout SOPs. He also indicated that via the emergency ordinance, the government will increase penalties for compound notices. The new penalty to be announced soon was in response to public anger over companies breaching COVID-19 SOPs but couldn't be fined beyond 1,000 ringgit. We'll take a short break. Stay with us.
Anda dinasihatkan untuk tidak mudah mempercayai berita yang tidak sahih. Elakkan berita palsu. Dapatkan info di portal sebenarnya.my. Tak pasti, jangan kongsi.
Welcome back to AWANI Tonight. We are keeping an eye on developments in Myanmar. The military once again seized power after top civilian leaders, including State Councillor Aung San Suu Kyi and President U Win Myint, have been taken into military custody early this morning, prior to the first scheduled session of Parliament. The military has declared a state of emergency for 1 year. Commander-in-Chief General Min Aung Hlaing has been announced that he was to assume power. Now, the move comes after days of escalating tension between the civilian government and the military that claimed fraud in an election which saw Aung San Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy (NLD) expanding its parliamentary majority at the expense of the military-backed opposition party. Hours after seizing power, Myanmar's military said it will hold fresh elections and hand power to the winning party once the state of emergency has elapsed. This coup d'etat is the first against its civilian government since 1988, which ended in 2015 following a general election which installed Aung San Suu Kyi as state councillor. Let's take a step back to understand what has led to this power grab. In November 8th election, the ruling NLD won a landslide victory to form the next government. But the military-backed opposition has demanded a rerun of the election, warning that it will take action if the election dispute is not settled. On January 28, the Election Commission rejected allegations of vote fraud, and just last Saturday, the military promised it will abide by the constitution and act according to law after playing down rumors of a coup. Today, the military detained the country's top civilian leaders and seized power. Globally, world leaders have condemned the coup and called for the release of Aung San Suu Kyi and other leaders. Malaysia, in a statement, meanwhile, called on parties in Myanmar to resolve any electoral disputes peacefully. Now, we'll be discussing more on this tonight on Consider This to find out what is next for democracy in Myanmar. That's coming up at 10 p.m. All right, before we end the show tonight, we want to bring the focus back home. The pandemic has revealed a number of deficiencies in our society. This could be due to an over-reliance on existing systems, which may not be the best fit for the problems we are facing today. Inequality, digital divide, social cohesion, all these issues require a new thinking. We spoke with DS Nazir Razak about the need to rewrite the script for Malaysia. Here's what he has to say.
We need to rewrite the script in the same way as we did in 1970. That was a script written after there was a breakdown in civil order in the May 13th riot. It was written for Malaysians at that time. It was written based on the global environment of that time. And the authors, as I know, envisaged that this system would not last forever. In fact, in the case of the new economic policy, so therefore I call for another process of rewriting the script, and I think we should repeat what we did in 1970 by setting up a national consultative council of our leaders as well as our best and brightest to debate, to argue, and then to come up with a new script, a new system for our country going forwards.
A new script or a recalibration requires reform. But what kind of reforms do we need to address existing problems of today?
Every time we try and reform, we are not comprehensive enough. You look at how Pakatan tried to even sign the ICERD, right? And he got this pushback from the Malay community, and the politics dictates that, they had to pull back. Otherwise, they lose too much support from the Malay community. Same thing happened with the UEC. And same thing happened for the new economic model, right? Because if you try and do reforms in piecemeal, then everything is then translated in racial terms. This is bad for my community, so therefore I resist it. But if you had a package deal where my community gets this, the other communities get this, but actually overall we are all better off, I think it can be done. And that's why I think we need to first and foremost set up this National Consultative Council comprising of the right set of people to come up with this new deal for Malaysia.
In crafting a new deal, we need to learn from lessons of the past. Here is Nazir's critique of the existing system.
This kind of new social contract that I think we should deliberate is also how we make sure that our policies are even more inclusive. I mean, one thing that the NEP was good at was poverty eradication, and those results have been tremendous. But today, clearly, inequality is the bigger issue, and we need to think about the deal between the government and the government. And between the government and the governed. So what we need to do is sit down, put all the cards on the table, renegotiate everything, and present the new deal as a package to Malaysians. This is for a new Malaysia going forwards.
That is all we have for you on AWANI tonight. Thank you for watching. My name is Cynthia Ng. We'll see you tomorrow.